All right, good morning. I call the meeting of the Legislative and Human Resource Committee to order. Any public comment? Seeing no one rushing the podium there, we will close that part of our meeting. Approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion and support to motion by Pakla, supported by Teal? Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes say yes. Yes. All those opposed? Last meeting's minutes have been approved. All right, next on our agenda, the prosecutor's office, a performance measurement review. Chris Becker, our prosecuting attorney.
Thank you. I feel like I'm in theater of the round here, like I'm back in, got to look around all the way here, but I appreciate the opportunity hopefully not too much. I appreciate the opportunity to get out here and talk about our office and what we've done over the past year since we presented here last time. And as you see, I have a, kind of a piece of artwork that you probably don't think of when you think about the prosecutor's office. Is why is there a piece of artwork up there and we're talking about performance review? I want to get into that because when we talk about priority 3 and kind of copying it off of last year, adopt innovative ways to deliver services that maximize efficiency and provide exceptional experience. And I think what I'm going to talk about is these ladies right here, my victim witness unit. It's probably, I hate to say forgotten, but this is probably one of the least well-known divisions within the unit. But this artwork ties directly into what they do. This is not the whole office. This is Angelica Ferrer, the one person in from the left. She's the head of it, and I think she's done an outstanding job of mobilizing these women to really do extraordinary things. And to the right there, you see the picture of me speaking and then 63rd District Court. This would be Crime Victims' Rights Week. It happens back in April. Usually it's the second week of April. I think this year we had it in the third week. But we have a kind of a remembrance during Crime Victims' Rights Week. And talk about working together and collaboration. I know it's a big thing that we always talk about here, is we put together, we've got our office, we work with 63rd District Court, and then obviously the Sheriff's Department's there to get, inner cooperation, but then we also bring in Moms on a Mission right there. You see those big pictures right there. That's a local community organizing group. Those are murdered victims. Those are homicide victims. They put posters on. They go around to different places in the city of Grand Rapids trying to raise awareness and saying, hey, these people have died and this is what violence means. So we get them, we get Grand Rapids Police, we get the Kentwood Police Department, and then we have this memorial, and then we read the names of victims who have died over the past year. So it's a really moving event. It was a beautiful day that day, so we had a really good turnout. But part of that, they want the extra step. This is something Victim Witness always is part of it goes above and beyond, if you will. This is not part of their normal duties. They organize putting that artwork together. It's circles, and you'll see the finished product right here that's hanging right now in our Victim Witness unit. But those were victims. Those were actually ex-convicts. People have come there that have reformed their lives. There's police officers. There are advocates that came together to make each square, if you will. And I can't remember the exact title, but what the artist says, this emphasizes the importance of encircling one another with a compassionate community in our collective journey towards healing. So it's got a very good message. And when you have all these different groups that maybe don't always come together to make this piece of artwork, and you should have seen the inside of the 63rd District Court. I mean, it was great to have them help us out because it was, it looked like, preschool. Everybody's got their paper and glue and cutting things, and they came up with I think is a really cool piece of art that now hangs in our office with a really great message in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of criminal justice and what these women do. So often we talk about the numbers, and when you get, when you look at our annual report, here's the numbers. We got 7 advocates, and they got 2,100 cases in circuit court and felony cases in district court, and we got 1 advocate for our juvenile cases. And that's the basic numbers, and that's, okay, that seems like a lot. But a couple weeks ago, we were going, and this was it was fairly typical, but this was almost a typical week, okay? When you break down those numbers, what does it mean for those ladies, and quite frankly, what does it mean for our criminal APAs that are handling these cases? So the week of July 17th, we had 3 trials go in circuit court, 3 felony trials, 2 murder cases. And as you can see there's 52 witnesses in one, 32 witnesses in the other. That's a lot of witnesses. That's part of what the advocates do, is help the APAs try and schedule it. I mean, you guys try and think about trying to schedule this meeting. Try to schedule, okay, you've got a week that the judge has got to schedule that we're not, we got a basic idea, but sometimes things pop up. Trying to schedule 52 people over a week, lab techs from Michigan State Police Crime Lab in Lansing, or we're flying people. We had an issue, we had to bring somebody in from Georgia, to fly those people in from Georgia and trying to organize all that. And more importantly, what they're also doing is not only scheduling those people, but they're sitting with the victims' families. You got 2 homicide cases, you can have anything between 2 and 22 family members that are there who have been traumatized, who are sitting there, maybe have to watch an autopsy photo or crime scene photos and trying to console them and trying to walk them through the process and be patient and listen to their complaints about how, this case has taken so long, or why are they attacking my, loved one who died. And so they're part social worker, really trying to counsel these people, but then they're also trying to stay on top of helping out these witnesses, making sure people stay on time, on top of the 131 settlement conferences and 68 sentences. Those are also things they've got to reach out. Now, about a quarter of those are probably drug cases where we don't actually have a victim that they have to reach out to. But in terms of settlement conferences, you got to make sure the victims are aware that they have a right to come in the sentencing, if they want to talk to the judge and tell the judge. So that's just in circuit court. Well, then you throw in district court, and these are the same 7 ladies. In terms of breaking it down, you've got, 5 district courts with 10 different judges, 100 PCCs. PCCs are probable cause conferences. Those are felony cases. We have charged felony cases. That's their first step in the criminal process. So that's 100 for just that week. That means for our APAs, probably about a week before, we authorized 100 cases. Now we have a hearing where the advocates are supposed to call if there's a victim involved to see, hey, what is your input? We're trying to save the citizens from coming downtown or coming to court because it's taken out of their day. So to come into court, and we call them instead and say, hey, what would you like to see happen? How do you feel about this case? Here's what's going on. They got to make those calls. There's 8 district court jury trials. Once again, you don't have 52 witnesses, but you got to schedule people in for 8 different courts. You have the pretrial conferences. Those are misdemeanors with Judge O'Hara. That's just 2 judges. I just picked those out because every single Tuesday, without fail, there's about 50 pretrial conferences in 63rd District Court alone. Okay, that's a lot, just in 63rd, not taking in the other courts. So that when you start breaking down the numbers per week, per day, what these women are going through, and quite frankly, what our APAs are going through in terms of trying to handle this volume and caseload, it gives you, I think, a better picture of what those numbers mean and how much work is put in by these advocates who don't get a whole lot of credit, and quite frankly, the criminal attorneys as well, who are working these cases and trying to stay on top of it, because that's just not just this week, it's next week and the week after that. It generally doesn't slow down a whole lot a week in, week out. And to top it off, we're here kind of coincidentally today, if you're around, this is another event, a public event, it's National Night Out. So I would encourage you, these are the 4 events we're covering today, but there's events all over the city of Grand Rapids and across the county. It's just a nice way to get out, support the police, talk with the police, other community activists and stuff, and it's just kind of a fun thing. We pass out candy, talk. There's usually no presentations of a bounce house and a cookout and stuff like that. So if you're in your neighborhood, take a look. Most of the time it's from, I think our first one with the Sheriff's Department out in South Kent is 4:30. They go 4:30 to 8. So it's just a nice evening, nice night to be out and enjoy something. That's one of the things the advocates are also very involved in connecting. Sobriety 2 is probably the easiest one in terms of what we do in terms of trying to promote a safe and healthy community. So a safe and healthy community is public safety. And so when you look at it, and I went back from the last time I gave this presentation was April, and we talked about it, Al and I were just talking about it last week. I think we had 45 homicide cases awaiting trial. We're kind of dealing with the backlog of homicide cases at jail. Well, we've kind of hit an equilibrium, if you will, because if you look, since then, we've had, 20 homicide trials that have gone through that, not even talking about the resolutions where we pled. These are 20 homicide trials that we've gotten. But in the meantime, we've issued 23 more homicide charges. So, we're clearing them out, but we're adding them on. That's a difficult thing, but it's something we need to do. Those are, homicide cases are the most serious ones. If you look at it, we're also doing investigative subpoenas on 18 different ones. And investigative subpoenas, what we don't, unfortunately, we're not getting a ton of cooperation with a lot of these witnesses, so we bring them in the investigative subpoena. It's a court proceeding. We put them under oath. We get a statement from them, and hopefully that helps us solve some of these homicide cases. These are old cases. These are not all homicides that occurred within the last year. Some may go back a couple of years, but we're trying to work with our police partners. It's another tool that we have to try and bring people in and get justice for these families of murdered victims. And so that's generally what we use them on. Every once in a while, like a CSC case has got to be a felony, but those are primarily what we're doing investigative subpoenas on. So just about every APA in our office, including me, I think I got 4 or 5 homicides myself. I mean, we need to have the manpower doing that. When you look at it, part of the, gun charges. Gun charges are very serious. We're over 600 gun charges over the past year since I was here last time. It was 676. It's something we see every day. I used to say, domestic violence and drunk driving are crimes we see every single day, and that still holds true. Gun charges are almost getting like that in terms of the CCW, of people getting pulled over with guns in the car that they should not have them in the car. And so we're charging a lot more. And then we've seen the kids that have been involved in the car thefts. There's a misperception that we're not doing anything. Nothing's happening, and we can do a whole new presentation in juvenile law. But right now, we're charging them. We are charging UDAAs, unlawful driving away of an auto, that is a car theft, and then receiving and concealing a motor vehicle. We're doing those charges. We're charging a lot of kids, a lot of young adults, but we're charging them because we don't have a whole lot of options. We can't just let it go because it is something that has really impacted the public. I know I've heard about it. I'm sure you have as well. So we're doing what we can to keep up on public safety. And just in terms of the equilibrium, there's our numbers just in terms of 2021 to 2022. There's a slight drop off in felonies, but a slight increase in misdemeanors. These are just adult offenses, but this is pretty much hanging, nothing huge. Maybe the hugest issue is in your juveniles. You look at the difference in terms of the increase in juvenile offenses that have gone over last year. We're seeing a pretty big increase, and especially in denied ones. Part of that is raise the age, but part of that is just we're seeing a lot more juvenile crime, and that's kind of what we're pulling. Law enforcement, myself, we met with our law enforcement partners in terms of what's going on with the stolen cars, because they were getting frustrated because it's kind of a catch and release. The kids, we don't have room in the juvenile detention facility, so they get released and they're committing more crimes, and we're not helping anybody with that, but we try to explain to them, trying to take, hey, here's some things we can do to maybe cut down on it, but it's a big issue, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. One of the things we are trying to do in the juvenile area, trying to look at unique ways on how to do things, is our restorative justice program. This is something we started in 2018. As you can see, there's 156 cases sent to our office, but about 42 that fulfill the agreement. Well, it's a unique program. Restorative justice requires the victim to want to participate as well as the defendant. So we offer it. 156 cases, we reach out to the victim and say, hey, would you like to participate in restorative justice, where you bring the victim and the defendant together, you get in a room, and you have the victim say, this is, how this impacted me. This is something that impacted me, how it impacted me, and you get the juvenile to maybe hear that. And I'm hoping to change behavior, trying to say early on, these are minor offenses. These are for kids who have been through at least one time before in a minor offense. They're coming through a second time to try and say, hey, you might not think it's a big deal, but this is what it means to that victim, and kind of come up with an agreement. It's been overwhelmingly, when the victims participate, they love it. It's just getting, most of the time the victims are saying, I don't want to deal with it. This is, I don't want to come down to court. I don't want to separate. It's a process, but I'm hoping to really, maybe change it an early behavior, and you can give you an idea what the charges are. Finally, most of them are malicious destruction of property. Somebody doesn't think, well, I busted a car window. They don't think it's a big deal, but if you're coming out to go to work and all of a sudden you got a busted car window and you got to call the repairman to do all that, that changes your whole day and your whole outlook on life. So we're hoping to have a little bit more of an impact. We're charging juveniles, though. We've increased our traditional waivers. A traditional waiver is where you, because of the juvenile's history, it may not be a very serious offense. A lot of those receiving and concealing motor vehicles, we have juveniles with 6, 7, 8 convictions. At some point in time, I'm like, okay, we've done all we can in the juvenile system. We can traditionally waive them into the adult system. And we're also charging, the very serious offenses, the murders and the CSEs. As an automatic waiver, we're doing that as well. So we're trying to take a dual approach in terms of, okay, we're trying to give you an opportunity, but if push comes to shove, we'll charge you and put you in the adult system because we don't have a whole lot of options. And so that's what we're doing there. I always like to talk about our family law division. Family law is basically our child support division. If you look at that, we're we're probably at the top of just across the board in the state. One of the things is service of process. As you can see from there, we've really tried to improve the service of process, getting a case in, and then trying to get the non-custodial parent served. Hey, you've got a kid, you've got to take your responsibilities. We've increased that 22%. Other counties are now looking at that, saying, hey, what are you guys doing? How are you guys, how can we copy that to try and get these non-custodial parents served? This is another, the CAR processing, when we get a referral from the Office of Child Support, that child support saying, hey, there's a kid out there who needs support. When we get those reviewed, 98% of the time, we're within 14 days acting on it, which is, quite a bit ahead of just about every other county in the state. You also look at, I think locating the non-custodial parent. That's a huge issue in terms of just getting located. And this is important. I think this is a crime prevention function as well, to get the kid the support they need and also get the family relationship, because part of that is also setting up a visitation, generally with the father. Trying to get that family. If you have a good family, an intact family with a kid that, is getting, supported properly, I think that goes a long way to preventing crime. So I think this is something that we're doing a pretty good job of. And then final orders, 90%, getting a judgment, a final order of the case, 92%. I think that's the ultimate, hey, we've successfully served them, we've got them in, here's the order, and then we turn it over in front of the court. So I think that's what we're supposed to do, and I think we're doing a very good job. I also like trying to give a shout out to employees over the family division. We kind of got the two bookends. I thought this was kind of cool that we have Sherry Foster, who's going to retire in October. She got the Lifetime Achievement Award. And then Yasmin Dahan, who's I think, 3 years in the office, she got the Rising Star Award. So somebody retiring, somebody coming up, and these are two employees that work in our office. There's, that are doing a heck of a job that they're recognized statewide by the Prosecuting Attorneys Association for the. I talk about appeals. Appeals are, kind of like everything else. There's a lot more appeals going through. The set-aside convictions, we'll see what the impact is. We have the automatic set-asides that the law just went into effect. So that may cut down, but the expungement stuff, we got one person essentially that's doing expungement motions. It's that big, and you can see the filings in circuit court. Part of that, from 753 to 9, is also we're getting more trials. We're coming out of pandemic. There's no appeals out of trials. So we're doing a lot better, a lot more appeals in terms of our circuit court filings. And then we're still trying to do a community engagement. As you see on the left, I went to Puertas Abiertas. We did a know your rights kind of presentation for a domestic violence group that's here in the city, trying to really reach out and say, hey, these are domestic violence victims. Well, domestic violence is a whole big issue, but then you add, whether they're legal or non-legal immigration status, that adds a whole different layer, trying to explain to them what their rights are. We're there to try to protect them. Just because they may be legal or illegal or whatever it is, we're there to try and listen to, you don't have a right to be assaulted just because of where you live and what you're doing here. Rock the Block, we have the Wearing Blue Day. That's a child abuse in April that we do, and as I said, National Night Out. Trying to engage the community because I think there's a lot of, mystery, if you will, in terms of what the prosecutor is and what the prosecutor does, trying to engage people saying, we're here to try and make the community better, not just put people in prison. As I've said, juvenile crime is a big issue coming up. I don't know what we're doing. We are pulling our hair out to some extent because there's just not a whole lot of options, not only locally but statewide. They're shutting down detention facilities. Even if we try and go out of state, for very, very serious offenses, if we send them out of state, it can run $400 to $500 a day for a juvenile placed in a facility in Arizona to try and correct. Those are for very serious. And then, circuit court budget, that comes out of the circuit court budget. And they don't like that a whole lot. Maybe do 2 or 3 of those. I can't do it on a regular basis. Digital evidence is a huge thing. That's a digital evidence, one thing internally for our office. Everybody's got one of these, including the criminals, and it's a great evidentiary tool where we can get into phones, we can, see text messages, emails, computers, whatever it is, track the phones, were they near the scene of the crime, but managing that, trying to, store it, share it with defense, because defense has every right to get digital evidence, and we want to share it in a reasonable manner. But it's a process. There's a lot of things that we've got to go through in trying to store it, share it, and manage it appropriately. And so that's one of the things I'm trying to find is a digital evidence management tool and even a person to kind of be in charge of sharing it, because it's a huge amount that comes into our APAs. And then our staffing issues. Staffing issues is a big thing. Michigan Indigent Defense is getting a ton of money. By no means am I saying they shouldn't. We think I'm fully supportive of getting a good attorney for the defense. We don't want to try a case over. It's not good for us. It's not good for our victims. But they're getting a lot of money that comes from the state. We're not getting state money. So right now I'm outnumbered in Kentwood. There's 3 indigent defense attorneys out there to our 2. Same thing in 63rd. So and just in the misdemeanor level, and that's not that big of a deal. Indigent defense only takes a portion. We got to deal with all of the defendants. Okay, we've got the ones who don't hire indigent defense. They're just getting the appointed ones. So just to have, I think victims have a right to have the same level of representation, and the numbers and caseloads should be comparable. And so staffing issues, and we're seeing it. We fortunately appreciate you guys approving the raise for new APAs coming in, because that's a huge difference. We have one of the higher starting salaries, and that's a big deal because I know a lot of prosecutors' offices across the state are losing lawyers to indigent defense because they have a higher starting salary and even a higher salary in other counties. And so they're seeing a big out, people going out and not wanting to do prosecution because they get paid more as a defense. seeing that here, but we want to make sure we want to keep this attractive and getting good people, because this is an important job. You have to have good people that understand the role, the power of the prosecutor's office to do it ethically and I think pay and goes with that. So that's my spiel. Taking any questions?
Commissioners? I know we'll got to have a couple questions here.
I'm not offended if you don't, so.
Commissioner LeGrand.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I really appreciated that you kind of highlighted the work of the Victims Witness Unit, and I'm acquainted with Ms. Frere, and she is really so impressed with her and with the work that she does and how compassionate and level-headed she is. She's very impressive. I'm wondering, can you just go a little bit more into this digital evidence? Are you saying that it's creating a workload, just like a heavier workload
Yeah.
because of having to sort through
You
all
gotta
the?
sort, yeah, not only the phones, but the body cams, in-car videos. I mean, that's, a drunk driving, your typical drunk driving would be, you may have 3 hours of video to review, because you gotta review not only the arresting officers, you maybe have his partner, and so we gotta review that. Where do you store it? How do you store all that video? How do you get it out? We use evidence.com, which is a pretty good way to do it right now, but to get that out to the defense, sometimes it requires editing. So we present a trial and there's a statement on there by the defense saying, well, this is only my 4th drunk driving. We got to edit that out. They can't hear that. The jury can't hear that, so you have to edit it. So we have to have editing software to take that out when you present it to a jury, that they just see, his field sobriety test and so forth like that. So it's a whole host of issues in terms of taking it in, editing it, getting it out. So yeah, it's all kinds of stuff like that.
And does that all have to be done by APAs, the reviewing?
Right now it
of-
is.
It
Right
is,
now it's
yeah.
part of we had a assistant, not assistant, but Will, he was actually going to the University of Michigan, which I didn't hold against him, so I hire Michigan people. But he was doing it, he was a college student and working and helping edit it and presenting. He was amazing to, present stuff at trial, but he's moving on, he's going to law school, so it would be nice, have another position, we can find somebody that helps out.
And,
He
right.
can't do every case because we get too much, but the APAs are primarily the ones doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, obviously you need a legal eye on a fair amount of that, but it just seems like if you could have someone helping to review that,
Yep.
who you're not paying as much, and, yeah, wonderful, thank you.
Commissioner Baker.
First of all, I hope that not much of your work is farmed out to college students, because I know them well.
But they know more about technology and editing stuff than, I'm like, okay.
It's true. I'm just like, thinking this seems like a pretty big job for like a college intern, but just some thought, maybe I need to ask this to the sheriff's office, but what's going on with the increase in juvenile crime? I mean, what do you guys have conversations about what you think is happening?
Yeah, I think it's a whole host of issues. I mean, I think if I had everything once is what's the one thing, and I don't think there is one thing. I mean, part of it's the breakdown of the still dealing with the programming and stuff, so there's a lot of kids that kind of got hear different things in terms of, they don't have jobs because they're stealing cars, but a lot of these stealing cars they're not really joyriding. For a while there, it was joyriding and then going to steal guns and then selling those, but that's kind of gone down. So I think it is just a whole combination of societal issues that, we as a criminal justice, we can deal with some of it. We can lock them up or not lock them up or do something like that. There's a breakdown of issues. There's kids that are kind of talk about the activists. They've lost hope. They don't think they can be a lawyer. They don't think they're not going to get a job.
Commissioner Bujak.
Thank you, Chair. You made a comment about catch and release. Do these young individuals actually end up in court with
Sure.
these charges?
Oh, sure, but the thing is, we have 98 beds in juvenile detention. Okay, so you you don't get sentenced to juvenile detention. It is, you can lodge them there in the interim, whether, they get picked up by their parents. But under Michigan law, we have to put juveniles in the least restrictive means necessary, which is generally, we have detention or parents. I mean, there's very little other, intermediate things. So the vast majority, so you picked up for stealing a car, you release to your parents. You picked up stealing a car a second time, you're gonna get released to your parents. Maybe on your fifth or sixth when, but that's what the police are kind of getting frustrated on, is like, we arrested this kid last week and here he is back on the street. And we're like, yeah, but we don't have the beds. There's not, and you just funded a juvenile expansion. So it's not like, but where you're kind of putting them back out in the situation that they were committing the crimes as it was, and they're getting frustrated. And, it's, after a point, they'll get lodged. But even then, there's a lot of repeat offenders. I had a 14-year-old last summer, he's committed 14 felonies over the course of last summer from May to September. Yeah. He was, what was he at? He was 14, yeah. So it's, how do you, and none of them were, they weren't, it was an unlawful use, it was no murders or anything like that. It was the low-level stuff. But that's a repeat, and what are we doing with that child? How is that helping him by, so he's got a bunch of charges. We if we can do something earlier, something more after 2 or 3, okay, I'm not saying lodge him, but what can we do to get into that family? And we're looking at ways, what can I do? Okay, I'm identifying you're going on the wrong path. What can we do as an intervention sooner? Trying to look at some other things, working with community partners. I tried something that didn't work, but something different.
Thank you. Commissioner Hennessy, I just figured I'd look at you long enough. I know you're going to raise your hand.
Well, I really appreciate that every year your staff shows up for National Night Out, and they're always on the west side at one of our events, and you have presence in other places as well. And the DPW often shows up, and I see the sheriff's department. So it's really nice to see your department and other departments as well be participating at the community level in this way. Thank you.
All right, anyone else? All right, thank you, Chris. I kind of hear that same thing. I know that frustration on the juvenile side is not just yourself or the sheriff's office. I know Mayor Kepley at Kentwood, he's quite frustrated. Obviously, it takes a lot of these folks getting together to create some solutions. My understanding that you're working on some possible ideas and groups that can get put together to answer some of these questions. So this is a big problem that I think our community knows about, that we obviously we gotta, again, help the child, but yet protect our community as well. So again, I appreciate your work on that. The digital evidence as well. Just the time that your staff has to go through that. I know my brother-in-law received a phone call because his phone pinged because there was a murder within a mile of him riding his bike by Johnson Park here this past year. And he heard the shot. So again, just think of that technology that somebody has to go through that calls this person up to say, hey, did you hear something, or where were you, or what were you doing? So obviously a lot of time consuming details folks have to work through. Again, appreciate your staff's dedication on going through that and doing a good job and putting the bad people behind bars. So again, I think it's important to, support you in any way we can to keep our community safe, and I appreciate the job you're doing. Thank you. All right, our next item is from the Sheriff's Office.
Action requested. Recommend to the Board of Commissioners to add 1 lieutenant, 5 sergeants, and 14 correction officers in the jail, and to recommend to the Finance and Physical Resources Committee to include the positions in the 2024 general fund budget effective October 1, 2023. Summary of requests. The Sheriff's Office is requesting 20 additional full-time county corrections positions. Several factors, including Kent County's population growth of more than 9% since 2010 and the changing nature of offenses, requires a more substantial investment to maintain safety in the facility without incurring excessive levels of overtime. 14 corrections officer positions are requested to apply updated shift relief factors to all posts requiring relief during absences away from the post. The additional corrections officer positions will enable the sheriff's office to more effectively take employee absence rates into account in the jail staffing plans rather than backfilling for absences using overtime. The added staff will also provide capacity for corrections officers to take their scheduled breaks. 5 sergeants and 1 lieutenant are requested to ensure sufficient on-site leadership capacity to effectively respond to critical incidents and provide direction and support for the corrections staff. The annualized cost to implement the first phase of the staffing plan is approximately $2.2 million. However, only $900,000 for fiscal year 2024 is needed due to the phasing in of the additional positions at different times over the course of the fiscal year.
Thank you, Al, appreciate it. Commissioners, looking for a motion and support. Motion by Teal, support by DeBoer. Commissioners, any comments, questions? Commissioner Hennessy.
I appreciate that we're, receiving this report now, but maybe you could get into the little bit of the background story. It wasn't in the initial budget, but it certainly is being presented to us before the budget is adopted, and some of the reasons why we have this level of request at this point.
Yeah, I think the major reason is we did have a comprehensive study done over the past 11 months or so, and the timing of the study did not fit perfectly with the timing of the budget process. So that's why they're off a little bit, and that's why we're dovetailing them now.
I would just, make the observation that, we do have just one corrections facility in this county, and so it does serve every community, and so keeping it properly staffed is important to every part of our community.
You bet. Commissioner LeGrand.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, perhaps if the undersheriff can answer a question, which is how, this is a lot of positions, and I know you're already, having difficulty fill positions. What would you see as a timeline for filling all of these?
So there's a couple phases that were presented as part of the correction staff and study. Phase 1 will be our first stab at accomplishing that. We've already started to recruit. We've already started to try to identify those who may be filling these roles, but it's a large number. And in addition to filling these, we're also trying to fill vacancies. So we're confident that by the time May 1 rolls around, that we will have sufficient staff to make the promotions necessary, and then the backfill of those promotions in addition to the 14 correction staff.
Right, so you're assuming that the sergeants and lieutenants will come from within already, and they'll be,
Yeah, it's a closed
Promoted.
rank system,
Yeah.
if you will, so
Okay.
the promotions will be within the same staff that we're hiring. So in reality, we have the 14 deputies that we're hiring at that entry level, but then we have to backfill the 6 that are being promoted to the various ranks.
right. Okay, so that phase 1 is not all 14 full-time positions?
That is phase 1.
That is,
Yeah,
okay.
phase 1 would be the 14 deputies, the 5 sergeants, and the 1
Okay.
lieutenant.
Great, thank you.
All right, any other commissioners? Commissioner Pakla.
Chair. Knowing, of course, that the system of overtime is a very complicated system to track, and we heard that during the last conversation that we had, I would be very curious just to, in about a year, to see what is that overtime looking like, knowing that it's not an apples-to-apples comparison, but we're hoping that these 20 positions are going to realistically improve the overtime situation that we've got in terms of backfilling those positions. So
That is absolutely one of the goals. Overtime is always going to be expected because we are a 24/7 operation, and to find that happy balance between having sufficient full-time staff but not overstaffing is that goal. One of the big things that we are finding with our staff that are leaving, it's the mandatory overtime. And that is truly a hardship, not only for the officer, but their families, when they're expecting their loved one to be at home, and all of a sudden they're getting a phone call, no, I have to stay an additional 4 or 8 hours. So that is one of our number one priorities with this additional staff, and it is definitely much appreciated for hopefully the approval.
All right, Commissioner DeBoer.
Chair, so for $900,000, that's approximately 20 full-time positions. Is that due to the less amount of overtime that you guys perceive will
No, it's based on not starting in October at the beginning of the fiscal year, but instead in May. So
Okay.
it's prorated.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other commissioners? Again, I think we had a great discussion on this as a full board, and again, I appreciated I think it was kind of one of the more robust conversations that we had, where just different perspectives that each of us bring to the table, and I thought that was, again, very enlightening when you were, when we were discussing that. So again, I appreciated that here a few weeks ago. All right, any other comments or questions? All right, all those in favor, please say yes. Yes. All those opposed? That has been approved. All right. Now it brings us to any miscellaneous. Do we have any miscellaneous? Any commissioners? Seeing none, meeting's adjourned.